It's interesting. Every now and then the calendars line up just right, and two huge holidays, the Qingming Festival and Easter, happen around the same time. On the surface, they seem like they couldn't be more different. But if you look closer, they share this incredibly profound connection. They are both powerful ways that we as humans respond to the reality of death. So today we're going to explore how these two traditions grapple with that same fundamental human experience. And it all starts with this one central question, a question that sits right at the heart of both observances, and really, a question everyone asks themselves at some point. Why do we actually die? As we're about to see, the answers couldn't be more different. So, first up, let's dive into the perspective that's really rooted in the traditions of Qingming. The approach here is to see death as this insurmountable, natural, final thing. In this worldview, death isn't really a problem that needs to be solved. It's just a fact of life. A person lives, and then they're gone. It's seen as a totally unavoidable, unchangeable part of the natural cycle. There's no getting around it, no way to reverse it. It is, very simply, the end. Okay, so if you're faced with this unavoidable end, what can you do? Well, the rituals of Qingming give us a really clear framework. We sweep the tombs of our ancestors, we commemorate the lives they lived, and we remember the past. These are really powerful acts of love and respect that keep their memory alive in our hearts. But here's the key thing to understand. All of these actions are about how we, the living, can face death. They offer a ton of emotional comfort, a way to process that loss, but they don't offer an answer to death itself. It's almost like standing in front of a giant, unbreakable wall. You can pay respect to what's on the other side. You can honor it, but there's just no way to get through it. All right, now let's completely switch gears and look at a totally different starting point. This is one that reframes the entire problem. The Easter tradition, it doesn't begin with death as just a natural thing. Instead, it asks a very different question. What if death isn't natural at all? What if it's actually a consequence, a price that has to be paid? And this brings us right to the core argument behind Easter. It's an idea that focuses not on the fact that we die, but on the reason why we die. To get our heads around this, we need to understand this key concept, atonement, or dai shu. As you can see, it's the act of an innocent person stepping in and taking the penalty for a guilty person, completely clearing their debt. Think of it like someone else paying off your entire mortgage for you. The whole logic here is built on a direct cause and effect relationship that comes right from Christian scripture. The wages of sin is death. Now, in this context, sin isn't just about doing bad things. It's about a state of separation, like a moral debt we owe. So death isn't a biological oopsie. It's the direct consequence, the wage that's earned for this moral debt. So this is the absolute crucial point in this whole framework. Jesus' death isn't seen as just the tragic end of a good person or a martyr. It's understood as a substitution. He, the innocent one, voluntarily took on the full penalty, death, that was owed by everyone else, the guilty. And in doing that, the debt was paid in full. The power of death was essentially used up. But look, paying the debt is really only half the story. That takes care of the cause, but what about the result? This is where the resurrection becomes more than just an amazing miracle. It becomes a logical necessity. It's the complete way out. Think about it this way. If Jesus had just come back to life without that atonement piece, sure, it would have been an incredible miracle, but it wouldn't have solved the deep-down root problem, that moral debt we talked about, sin. It would still be on the books. Death would still have its claim on every single one of us. So let's just walk through the logic here. It starts with step 1, the root cause, which is sin. That leads directly to step 2, the consequence, which is death. Then you have step 3, the payment. That's the atonement on the cross. And that brings us to the final, absolutely vital step, step 4, the proof. The resurrection is like the receipt. It's the proof that the payment was accepted and the debt has been cleared, for good. And the Apostle Paul really hammers this point home. He basically argues that if the resurrection didn't happen, the whole thing falls apart. It would mean the debt was never really paid and we'd all still be trapped by the original problem. So the resurrection is the definitive proof, the final word, that the atonement actually worked. So what happens when you put these two very different understandings of death right next to each other? Well, the entire experience of losing someone, the very meaning of grief itself, is completely transformed. This table really breaks it down nicely. On the Qingming side, the nature of death is a final endpoint. The emotional state is grief, maybe even grief with a sense of despair. And the core action is commemoration. Now, look at the Easter perspective. Death is reframed as just a temporary state. In fact, the Bible often calls it sleep. This changes grief into grief with hope. And the core action shifts from simply commemorating a loss to celebrating a victory over it. And this is such an important distinction to make. The Easter message isn't saying that Christians don't feel sad when a loved one dies. Of course they do. The sorrow is very real. But it fundamentally redefines that sorrow. It's no longer the hopelessness of a permanent goodbye. It becomes a temporary sadness, one that is filled with the hope of a future reunion. So when Qingming and Easter land on our calendars together, they push us to think beyond just how we should remember the dead. They present us with a much bigger, much more profound question, one that gets right to the very core of what it means to be human. Has the problem of death itself actually been solved?